My name is Margaret, though most people around town just call me Grandma Maggie. I am 75 years old, my hair is white as the winter snow, and my hands, though wrinkled, have worked harder than many young men in their prime. I have lived a long life filled with both laughter and sorrow, kindness and betrayal. But nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared me for what happened the year my sister passed away. Now before I go further, let me ask you this. Where are you watching from tonight? I want you to sit with me, as if we're at my kitchen table with a cup of tea in hand, while I tell you a story that still shakes me to my bones. This isn't just a story about land or cattle or even a shiny new car. No, it's about family choices and how life can turn upside down when you least expect it. Let me take you right into the middle of it all, the shocking part first, because that is how it struck me. I was sitting on the porch one late afternoon, watching the sunset paint the sky in golden orange, when the lawyer's car pulled up. He was dressed in his usual sharp suit, briefcase in hand, and I thought it was just routine business about my taxes. But when he opened that case and read out the will my late sister Clara had left behind, I almost fainted right there in my rocking chair. She had left me 150 acres of fertile land, 300 strong cattle grazing across rolling hills, and, of all things, a brand new Tesla sitting in her garage. I sat frozen, my heart pounding so loud I could hear it in my ears. My sister and I had been close as children, but in our later years we drifted apart. We talked only a few times a year, yet here she was, giving me more than I had ever dreamed of owning. I didn't even know what to say. All I could think about was how much kindness and love Clara must have still carried for me, despite the distance between us. Tears ran down my cheeks as I whispered a quiet thank you to the heavens. But that wasn't the most shocking part of the day. As I sat there trying to take it all in, I heard the crunch of gravel on the driveway. I looked up, and for a moment I thought my eyes were tricking me. A figure stepped out of a car parked by the fence. My throat went dry and my chest tightened. It was her. My estranged daughter Linda, the one I hadn't seen in over 20 years. The last time we spoke, our words were sharp, filled with bitterness and blame. She had walked out of my life, saying she never wanted to see me again. And yet, there she was, standing at the edge of my land. Her eyes locked on me as if no time had passed at all. Why had she come back now, after all these years? And why on this very day, the day I learned of my sister's gift? My heart raced with questions, but my lips could not form a single word. That moment was the beginning of everything. Joy, pain, suspicion, and a story I never thought I would live to tell. But before I take you deeper into what happened next, let me go back to the beginning. You see, to understand why Clara left me that inheritance, and why Linda's return was so explosive, you need to know who we are, where we came from, and the choices that brought us here. I was born in a small town in Texas, a place where the air smells of dust and cornfields, and where neighbors knew each other by name. My sister Clara was 2 years older than me. She was the beauty of the family, with chestnut hair that caught the sun and a smile that made folks stop in their tracks. But more than her looks, Clara had a heart that was soft and giving. She could never pass a hungry child without offering food, and she was the kind of woman who'd give her last dollar to someone in need. I, on the other hand, was more practical. My hands were always busy, sewing, cooking, raising children, and working in the fields. I wasn't as charming as Clara, but I had strength, and I carried the weight of responsibility when life grew hard. Maybe that's why she trusted me in the end. Our lives took very different turns. Clara married a wealthy rancher and lived a life of comfort. She traveled, wore fine clothes, and had no children of her own. I married a man named George, who was kind but poor. Together we built a life brick by brick, raising my daughter Linda, working long hours, and struggling through more hardships than I care to count. It was Linda who brought me my greatest joy and my deepest heartbreak. She was clever and bright, but also stubborn like her father. As she grew older, she wanted more than what we could give. She blamed me for holding her back, and when she turned 20, after a terrible argument, she left and never came back. Not even when George passed away. Not even when I begged her to at least send a letter. For years I carried that wound in my heart. A mother's love never dies. no matter how much pain her child causes her. I prayed for her every night, even when my pride kept me from reaching out. And now she had appeared at my door, on the very day I inherited everything. But let me not get ahead of myself. I want you to see the good in Clara first, because her kindness is at the center of this story. She had always believed in giving, even when others mocked her for it. I remember one winter decades ago, when a poor family down the road lost their home to a fire. Without hesitation, Clara took them in, fed them and gave them clothes. She told me, "Maggie, what's the use of having plenty if you can't share it with someone who has nothing?" Those words never left me. And now, as I looked at the inheritance she had left, I realized she had lived by that belief until her last breath. The days after her funeral were quiet but heavy with decisions. The land stretched farther than my old legs could walk. The cattle, all strong and restless, needed tending. And the Tesla, well, I laughed every time I looked at it. What was a 75-year-old woman supposed to do with such a car? Still, I was grateful but also worried. Because gifts like these don't come without responsibility. And now, with Linda standing at the edge of my driveway, everything I thought I knew about my life was about to change again. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying the moment over and over. The look in her eyes wasn't soft. It wasn't the look of a daughter coming home to embrace her mother. No, there was something else there. Something sharp, unreadable. And I couldn't shake the feeling that her sudden return wasn't about love. It was about the inheritance. But whether I was right or wrong, I would soon find out. Because the next morning, when I opened the door to feed the chickens, Linda was already standing there on the porch, waiting for me. When I opened the creaking wooden door that morning, the cool Texas air swept into the house, carrying with it the smell of earth and cattle from the fields. I clutched my shawl around my shoulders, ready to scatter corn for the chickens, when I froze in my tracks. There she was, Linda, my daughter. She was leaning against the porch railing, her arms folded tight across her chest, her face as unreadable as stone. Time had carved lines across her cheeks, and the softness of youth had hardened into something sharper. But I knew her. Oh, I knew her the way a mother always knows her child, no matter how many years pass. For a moment the world stood still. "Hello, Mama," she said, her voice low, careful. I opened my mouth to speak, but no sound came out. It had been over 20 years since I last heard her call me that word, Mama. My hands trembled as I gripped the doorframe for balance. What are you doing here, Linda?" I finally whispered, my voice shaky. She tilted her head, her eyes scanning the porch, the fields, the horizon where my sister's land stretched endlessly. Then her gaze came back to me, sharp as a knife. "I heard about Aunt Clara," she said. "And I heard what she left you." My heart dropped into my stomach. There was clear as daylight. She wasn't here for me. She wasn't here for love, or reconciliation, or forgiveness. She was here for the inheritance. And yet, even with the truth standing before me, I couldn't help but ache. My heart pulled in two directions, one filled with anger, the other with longing. She was my daughter, the child I once held close to my chest, the baby I had sung to sleep through countless nights. "Linda," I said softly, reaching out a hand. "I didn't know you even remembered us out here." She took a step back, refusing my touch. Her face was guarded, but I saw something flicker in her eyes, something she tried hard to hide. Was it pain, regret, or just greed? I couldn't tell. The silence between us stretched long, heavy. And then, without warning, she spoke again. "I want to stay here, Mama. On this land. With you." The words hit me like a hammer. Stay. After all these years, after slamming doors and bitter words, after disappearing into the world without so much as a postcard. And now, just like that, she wanted to stay. I felt the ground shift beneath me. The chickens squawked restlessly behind me as if they sensed the storm gathering. I swallowed hard and forced myself to stay calm. "Linda, this isn't just about staying. This is Clara's legacy. It's work, it's responsibility, it's mine too," she interrupted sharply. "She was my aunt. Her words cut deep, but I bit my tongue. I wanted to scream, to ask her where she had been when I buried George, when I struggled to keep food on the table, when I cried myself to sleep night after night praying she'd come home. But instead I just stared at her, tears threatening to spill from my tired eyes. The extreme moment was there. My daughter returned after 20 years, demanding a place in a life she had abandoned. But before I could answer, before I could decide whether to let my broken heart speak or my weary pride stand tall, I turned away. "Come inside," I said quietly. "We'll talk." Inside the old house, things felt calmer. The kettle hissed on the stove, and the familiar scent of coffee filled the air. I poured her a cup, though my hands still trembled. She didn't thank me. She just sat at the table, her eyes darting around the room like she was inspecting the place for the first time. And in truth, maybe she was. "You've done well for yourself," she said slowly, almost grudgingly. "The land, the cattle, the car." Her voice trailed off when she said car, as if even she couldn't believe her aunt had left behind a Tesla in the middle of ranch country. Chuckled dryly. "You think a 75-year-old woman knows what to do with such a thing? I can barely figure out how to turn it on." For a moment, just a flicker, the corner of her mouth twitched upward. Not quite a smile, but something close. My heart leapt at the sight. Maybe, just maybe, the little girl I once knew was still somewhere inside her. But just as quickly, her face hardened again. "So what happens now, Mama? With all of this?" I sipped my coffee slowly, trying to steady my thoughts. "What happens now is that I figure out how to honor Clara. She gave me more than I could ever handle alone. I'll need help with the cattle, with the land, with—" My voice faltered as I looked at her. "With everything." There was a pause, a long one. Then Linda leaned forward, her eyes sharp again. "Then let me help you. Let me be part of it. I deserve to be." My chest tightened. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe she meant what she said. But my gut whispered caution, like the low rattle of a snake in tall grass. I nodded slowly, but I didn't give her an answer. Not yet. Instead, I stood up, set my cup in the sink and said, "We'll see." That was the less extreme part. The coffee, the small flicker of hope, the uneasy truce. For a brief moment, it felt like maybe the storm could pass. But storms don't pass that easy. That night, as I lay in bed, I heard a noise outside. At first, I thought it was just the cattle restless in the field. But then I heard it again, closer, sharper. A metallic clang like a gate being forced open. I slipped my feet into my slippers, grabbed the old flashlight by the nightstand, and crept to the window. My heart pounded in my chest. And what I saw made the blood drain from my face. Someone was in the barn. The door was wide open, and a shadowy figure was moving inside, their shape barely lit by the moonlight. I gasped, clutching my chest. Was it Linda? Was she sneaking around already? Or was it someone else? Someone who knew about Clara's inheritance and wanted to take it for themselves? I didn't know. But I knew one thing for certain. Whatever was happening in that barn was about to change everything. My breath caught in my throat as I gripped the windowsill tighter. The barn loomed large and dark in the moonlight, the old wood creaking as if it, too, were nervous. My flashlight felt too small in my shaking hand. I couldn't just stand there. That barn wasn't just a building. It was filled with feed, tools, and equipment Clara had taken years to gather. And now it was mine to protect. My legs trembled, but my pride straightened my back. At 75, I wasn't as fast as I used to be. But stubbornness is a strength all its own. I slipped on my coat, shoved my feet into my boots, and stepped outside. The cold night air bit at my cheeks, but my focus was locked on that shadow moving through the barn. The gravel crunched under my steps, and the cattle stirred in the distance, their low moos sounding uneasy. As I reached the barn, the door groaned louder, swinging slightly on its rusted hinges. I raised the flashlight and called out, my voice louder than I felt inside. "Who's there?" The beam of light cut through the darkness, landing on a figure crouched near a pile of feed bags. The figure froze, then slowly stood. My heart nearly gave out when the light revealed her face. Linda. She squinted against the brightness, raising a hand to shield her eyes. Mama, it's just me, she said quickly. I didn't mean to scare you. Just you. I gasped, lowering the light but not my suspicion. What on earth are you doing sneaking into the barn at this hour? She shifted nervously, her boots scraping against the hay-strewn floor. I couldn't sleep. I just wanted to look around, to see what Aunt Clara left behind. I wasn't taking anything, I swear. Her voice trembled, and for a second I saw a glimpse of the young woman she once was, the girl who used to sneak cookies from the jar late at night, thinking I wouldn't notice. Still doubt gnawed at me. My heart wanted to believe her, but my mind whispered caution. Linda, I said slowly, this isn't how we do things here. If you need something, you ask. You don't creep around in the dark like a thief. Her eyes glistened, though whether from shame or anger, I couldn't tell. She nodded quickly, her hair falling across her face. I'm sorry, Mama. I wasn't thinking. I sighed, lowering the flashlight completely. Come on. Let's go back inside. We'll deal with this in the morning. And so we did. That was the less extreme moment. Quiet, uneasy, but without disaster. We walked back to the house together, though the silence between us was louder than any words. The next morning I tried to shake off the unease. I busied myself with chores, feeding the chickens, checking the fences, and boiling beans on the stove. Linda kept her distance, sitting on the porch with a faraway look in her eyes. Part of me hoped it was just nerves, that she was struggling to be home after all these years. Maybe she really did want a second chance. Maybe. But my instincts told me trouble was just beginning. And I was right. That evening, just as the sun dipped low and painted the sky pink, I heard the unmistakable roar of an engine. I stepped out onto the porch, shielding my eyes from the glare. A black pickup truck rolled slowly down the dirt road toward the house. Dust rose in its wake, curling like smoke in the air. My stomach sank as it pulled into the yard. The driver's door opened, and out stepped a man I didn't recognize. Tall, broad-shouldered, with a scruffy beard and eyes that scanned the property like he was measuring it. But it wasn't him that made my knees weak. It was the way Linda leapt from her chair, her face lighting up for the first time since she'd arrived. "Mark!" she called out, rushing down the steps. The man smirked and opened his arms wide, catching her in a hug that lasted far too long for comfort. I clutched the porch railing, my heart racing. Who was this man? Why did Linda look at him like that? And, most of all, what did he want with my land? Because deep in my bones, I knew one thing for certain. This stranger hadn't come here by accident. I gripped the porch railing so tight my knuckles turned white. My daughter, who had walked out of my life for more than 2 decades, was hugging a man I had never seen before. She hadn't hugged me when she showed up at my door. Not even a pat on the back. But this stranger. She clung to him as if he were her lifeline. "Mark," she said breathlessly, "you found me." He chuckled, low and confident, then glanced toward the porch where I stood frozen. His eyes lingered on me, sharp and calculating, the way a man sizes up a piece of land he's thinking of buying. "And you must be Mama Maggie," he said, stepping forward and tipping his head in mock respect. "I've heard a lot about you." I stiffened. Mama Maggie. Nobody called me that except folks who truly knew me. And this man, this stranger, certainly didn't. "What are you doing here?" I asked, my voice steady though my chest thumped like a drum. Mark glanced at Linda before answering, his arm still draped casually around her shoulder. "I'm here because Linda invited me. She thought it'd be good for me to see the new inheritance." The way he said the word, inheritance, made my stomach twist. Like the land, the cattle, and even the Tesla were nothing more than shiny toys for him to gawk at. Linda shifted uncomfortably but didn't step away from him. "Mama, Mark's been a good friend to me for years. He's helped me through a lot. I wanted him here with us." With us. Those 2 words stung worse than a bee sting. She'd been gone 20 years, and suddenly she wanted to form a we again, just not the one I had prayed for. Not the one of mother and daughter, but of daughter and stranger. The extreme part of the moment was there in full. A man with no ties to my family was standing on my porch, acting like he belonged. But I swallowed my pride and forced a thin smile. "Well, supper's at 6. You're welcome to join, Mr. Mark." "Don't mind if I do," he replied smoothly, giving me a grin that never touched his eyes. That evening, the house was filled with the smell of cornbread and beans simmering on the stove. Mark sat at my table as if he'd eaten there all his life, talking loudly about his work in construction, his travels, and the big plans he always had. Linda laughed at his jokes, her face softer than I'd seen it since her return. I mostly kept quiet, watching him, measuring his words, studying the way he looked around the room as if cataloging every item. My heart ached, but not from him. From her. From the way she leaned toward him instead of me. After supper, I cleared the plates while they talked in hushed tones on the porch. I caught snippets: land, money, future. My ears strained, but they always lowered their voices when I got close. That was the less extreme part of the evening, uneasy but calm. Nothing exploded. Nothing burned. Just whispers, doubts, and the heavy ache of suspicion pressing on my chest. But peace never lasts long in a story like this. Later that night, when the moon was high and the house was quiet, I went to check the locks on the doors. Old habits die hard when you live in the country. As I reached the front, something caught my eye. Tesla. It was no longer parked where I'd left it by the barn. The gravel showed fresh tracks leading out toward the main road. Froze, my breath catching. Who had moved it? I hadn't. And then I saw them, Linda and Mark, slipping through the darkness toward the truck parked by the fence. Linda was laughing softly, her hand gripping his arm, while the keys to Clara's Tesla jingled in his other hand. My knees nearly buckled. They weren't just here to help. They were already taking. And I knew in that moment, the fight for Clara's inheritance had only just begun. I stood frozen in the shadows of the porch, my old heart thundering in my chest. The keys jingling in Mark's hand rang louder than any church bell. That car wasn't just a vehicle. It was a symbol of Clara's trust, a piece of her I had been left to guard. And now here they were, slipping into the night like thieves. "Linda!" I cried, my voice carrying sharper than I intended. They both froze. Linda turned slowly, her face pale in the moonlight, while Mark's jaw tightened, his hand still clutching the keys. "Mama," Linda started, stepping forward. "It's not what it looks like." "Oh, it looks exactly what it is," I shot back, my voice shaking but strong. "You think you can just waltz back into my life, bring a stranger onto my land, and sneak off with something that isn't yours?" Mark stepped in front of her, his shoulders squared, his eyes narrowed at me. "Now hold on, ma'am. Nobody's stealing anything. Linda just wanted to take the Tesla for a spin, show me what it can do. No harm in that, right?" I glared at him, my grip tightening on the porch railing. If that's true, why sneak around in the dead of night? Why not ask? Linda's lips trembled, and for the first time since she arrived, I saw shame flicker across her face. I didn't want to upset you, Mama. I just wanted to feel like something here was mine too." Her words pierced me, and for a moment my anger faltered. Maybe she wasn't only being greedy. Maybe she was desperate to belong, to claim some part of her aunt's legacy of my life. But Mark's presence, his smugness, his silence, that told me the story wasn't so simple. I took a slow breath and steadied my voice. "Put the keys back. Tomorrow we'll talk. But tonight, nothing leaves this property." There was a long pause. Linda looked at Mark, and for a moment I thought he would refuse. But then, with a forced chuckle, he tossed the keys back onto the porch steps. "Fine," he muttered. "No harm done." That was the extreme moment, the confrontation, the truth of what they were capable of. The rest of the night passed quieter, though unease sat heavy on my chest. I locked the doors tighter than ever, and though Linda slept under my roof, I couldn't bring myself to trust her fully. The next morning, life settled into its routines. I fried eggs and bacon, set them on the table, and we ate in strained silence. Linda picked at her food while Mark shoveled his down like a man who hadn't seen a decent meal in weeks. After breakfast, I turned to Linda. "I'll need help today with the cattle. The fences need checking and the feed bins are running low. You coming?" She hesitated, then nodded. "All right, Mama." 4 hours we worked side by side under the hot sun. I showed her how to tie the fence wire tight, how to call the cattle in, how to keep an eye on the ones that looked weaker. She listened, though her hands weren't as steady as mine. And for a short while it felt almost normal, like maybe this was the start of something healing. She even laughed once, when a curious calf tried to nibble at her bootlaces. It was the less extreme part of the day, that fragile moment of calm. But in my gut, I knew peace wouldn't last. I was right. Just as the sun dipped low and we headed back toward the house, a car roared down the gravel road, spitting dust into the air. This one wasn't Mark's truck. It was a silver sedan, shiny and out of place in the country. It screeched to a halt in front of the porch, and out stepped a woman I had never seen before. She wore heels too high for gravel, a dress too fine for ranch dust, and sunglasses even though the sun was nearly gone. She pushed them down the bridge of her nose, her eyes cold and sharp. "You must be Margaret," she said smoothly, her voice like honey mixed with poison. "I'm Claire. And I'm here because that land, those cattle, and that car you've been left, don't just belong to you. They belong to me." The words slammed into me like a fist. Another stranger. Another claim. Another fight about to begin. The air went still, as if even the cicadas had stopped their song. I stared at the woman standing in front of me, heels digging into my gravel, her perfume cutting sharp against the smell of cattle and hay. "You heard me," Claire said, slipping her sunglasses into her purse. "That land, those cattle, car. You may have the papers in your name, but by right, they belong to me." I gripped the porch post, my heart hammering. "And just who do you think you are?" She smiled thinly, but it wasn't the smile of a friend. It was the kind of smile you see on a snake before it strikes. I was Clara's business partner. And more than that, I was her closest companion. She promised me everything. That ranch was supposed to be mine. Her words cut me deep. Clara had never spoken of anyone named Claire, never mentioned a partner, let alone someone she promised her life's work to. Behind me, Linda gasped softly, while Mark crossed his arms, watching the exchange with a look of sly interest. "You have no proof," I said firmly, my voice steady though my knees wobbled. Clara's lawyer read her will clear as day. She left it all to me. Claire's eyes narrowed. "Lawyers can be persuaded. Papers can be forged. Don't get too comfortable, old woman. I'll have what's mine, one way or another." That was the extreme moment, the strike of a rattlesnake in human form, her threat hanging heavy in the air. But as quickly as she arrived, she turned on her heel, climbed back into her shiny car, and roared off down the gravel road, leaving nothing behind but dust and a promise of trouble. The yard fell silent again. Linda looked at me, her face pale. "Mama, was she telling the truth? Did Aunt Clara really?" "No," I snapped before she could finish, my chest tightening with anger and grief. "Clara would never betray me like that. Never." But even as I said it, a seed of doubt burrowed into my mind. Clara had been secretive in her later years. She'd lived far from me, wrapped in a life I hardly knew. Could she have promised someone else what she left to me? That night, I sat at the kitchen table long after Linda and Mark had gone to bed. The lamp glowed softly as I spread Clara's papers across the table. Deeds, letters, her will, all neat and tidy as the lawyer had left them. I searched for clues, for some mention of Claire, for anything that could explain the storm that had just rolled into my yard. But the papers said nothing. Only Clara's name and mine, tied forever by her last act of love. I sighed and rubbed my temples. Maybe Claire was lying. Maybe she was just another greedy soul circling like a vulture now that they smelled money and land. I prayed that was all it was. That was the calmer moment. The papers, the quiet, the whisper of hope that maybe things would steady again. But as I finally pushed the papers aside and blew out the lamp, I caught sight of something strange through the window. Mark's truck. It wasn't parked where he had left it earlier. Instead, it sat by the barn with its headlights off, the faint glow of a cigarette flickering inside the cab. And then I saw him step out, phone pressed to his ear, pacing in the dirt. His voice carried faintly through the night air. Yeah. She doesn't suspect a thing. The land, the cattle, the car, it's all here. We'll have it soon enough. Don't worry. My blood ran cold. Mark wasn't just Linda's friend. He was plotting. And not alone. My whole body went stiff as I listened from the darkened window. Mark's voice carried just enough for me to catch the meaning, and that meaning hit like a hammer to the chest. She's old, she won't be able to fight us off. Once Linda's in good with her, we'll move. The land's worth millions, the cattle can be sold, and the car, well, that's quick cash. Millions. That word rang in my ears like church bells gone mad. I slapped a hand over my mouth to keep from gasping out loud. The very man sitting at my table, eating my food, was planning to rob me blind. And worse still, he was dragging my daughter into it. The porch creaked under my weight as I leaned forward, desperate to hear more. But suddenly, Mark flicked his cigarette to the ground, ground it under his boot, and climbed back into his truck. The headlights flared to life, blinding me for a moment, and then he drove off into the night. I staggered back from the window, clutching the edge of the table for balance. My chest ached with the weight of betrayal. My daughter had brought this man here. My daughter. The extreme part of the night was clear. Mark wasn't just a nuisance. He was a danger. But what could I do? I was 75, my body slower than my mind, and my heart heavy with both love and fear. I didn't sleep much that night. Instead, I prayed. I prayed for Clara, for wisdom, for strength. And I prayed for Linda most of all. Maybe she didn't know what Mark was really after. Maybe she was just blinded by his sweet talk and charm. My daughter had always wanted more than what I could give her, and maybe she thought he was her ticket to it. By morning I decided to play it smart. No screaming. No accusing. Not yet. If I showed my hand too soon, I'd lose whatever small advantage I had. Instead I'd watch. I'd listen. And when the time came, I'd strike like a rattler in tall grass. That was the quieter part of the day. I cooked breakfast like usual, biscuits and gravy, and watched as Linda and Mark ate across from me. Linda looked tired, shadows under her eyes, but Mark was cheerful, almost too cheerful, cracking jokes and complimenting the food. I forced myself to smile, though inside my stomach churned. After breakfast I told Linda, "Come with me to town. I need supplies." She hesitated, glancing at Mark. He shrugged, leaning back in his chair. "Go on. I'll stick around, check on the barn." My jaw tightened, but I said nothing. I needed time alone with Linda anyway. The drive to town was quiet at first, the road stretching dusty and long under the Texas sun. Finally I broke the silence. "Linda, do you trust that man?" Her hands gripped the steering wheel tighter. "Mark, course I do. He's been there for me when nobody else was." Her words stung, but I pressed on. "Baby, I don't like the way he looks at this place. It's not about us, it's about what's here. The land, the money, the car." She sighed heavily. "Mama, you don't know him like I do. He wants to help. We can take care of this place together. Don't ruin this for me." Her voice cracked just slightly on that last part, and I saw it then, the desperation in her eyes. She wasn't just defending him. She was clinging to him, the way a drowning person clings to driftwood. My heart softened, even as my worry deepened. I reached over, gently patting her hand. "I just don't want to see you hurt again." She didn't answer, just pressed her lips together and focused on the road. We made it back from town in one piece, but as we pulled into the yard, my heart nearly stopped. The barn door was wide open, and inside, through the dusty light, I saw the unmistakable glint of chains being wrapped around something heavy. When I stepped closer, my stomach dropped. Mark wasn't alone. 2 other men were in the barn with him. Strangers, rough-looking, their pickup backed in close. And they weren't tending cattle. They were loading them. I froze in the barn doorway, the sunlight behind me stretching my shadow across the dirt floor. Mark's head snapped up, his face tightening for just a second before he forced a smile. "Well, well," he said, dropping the chain in his hand. "Look who's up early." The 2 men beside him didn't smile. One had arms like tree trunks and a scar running across his cheek. The other chewed on a toothpick, his eyes darting between me and the cattle like he was already counting dollar bills. My voice shook, but I made it steady. "What in God's name do you think you're doing?" Mark spread his arms as if it were nothing. "Just moving some cattle. Buyers in town are interested. Figured we could make a quick sale, put some money in everyone's pocket." "These cattle aren't yours to sell," I snapped. "They belong to me, every last one. You touch them again and I'll—" "What?" the scarred man interrupted, his voice gravelly. "You'll stop us, Grandma?" He laughed, a sound that made the hairs on my neck stand. I tightened my grip on the pitchfork leaning by the barn wall. My knees might be weak, but my spirit wasn't. "Don't test me, boy. I've lived long enough to know how to defend what's mine." The men exchanged a glance, smirking. But before things could tip into real danger, Linda's voice rang out behind me. "Mama, what's going on?" I turned, my heart sinking. She stood just outside the barn, a sack of groceries in her arms, her face pale with confusion. Mark was quick, too quick. "Honey, it's nothing," he said, rushing over to her. "Your mama's just worked up. I was helping out with the cattle, that's all." Linda's eyes flicked from him to me, searching for the truth. "Don't believe him," I said firmly. "I caught them loading the cattle into that truck. They're thieves, Linda." Her face twisted with conflict. I could see the storm inside her, her love for me, her loyalty to him, her confusion over who was telling the truth. That was the boiling point. The barn, the thieves, my daughter caught between us. But instead of exploding, the moment cracked just slightly. The scarred man muttered something about coming back later and shoved past me, his shoulder hard against mine. The other followed, spitting his toothpick into the dirt. Mark watched them go, his jaw tight, before turning back to me with fire in his eyes. We all stood there in that barn, the cattle shifting nervously, the smell of hay thick in the air. Finally, Mark muttered, "This isn't over." He stormed out, gravel crunching under his boots, leaving Linda and me alone in the heavy silence. The quiet afterward was almost worse than the shouting. Linda set the groceries down, her hands trembling. "Mama," she whispered, "tell me the truth. Do you really think he's dangerous?" I looked at her. My baby, my girl, grown but still so lost. My voice softened. "I don't just think it, Linda. I know it. That man isn't here for you. He's here for this land. For Clara's gift. And if you're not careful, he's going to drag you down with him." Tears welled in her eyes, but she blinked them back, shaking her head. "You don't understand. He's all I have." I reached for her, but she pulled away, turning toward the door. My heart cracked, but I let her go. That was the calmer moment. The barn emptied of strangers, just me and my daughter torn apart by the web of lies. But that night, just as I began to think maybe things had settled, a sound shattered the quiet of the ranch. Cattle. They were bellowing, panicked, their cries tearing through the dark like sirens. I threw on my robe, lit a lantern and hurried outside. My bare feet crunched over gravel as I ran toward the pasture. And that's when I saw it. The northern fence, cut clean through. The cattle were scattering into the night, their shadows stretching wild across the moonlit fields. And standing near the fence, silhouetted by the glow of truck headlights, was Mark. With him were the same 2 men from the barn. And this time they weren't sneaking. They were driving my cattle straight off my land. The night air was thick with dust and the thunder of hooves. My lantern shook in my hand, the light bouncing wildly across the pasture. "Stop!" I screamed, my voice breaking the stillness like a whip crack. The men barely glanced my way. Mark waved his arm, hollering to the others as they herded the cattle through the broken fence toward the waiting trucks. The animals bawled, frightened and confused, their massive bodies pushing against each other in the chaos. I dropped the lantern to the ground, snatched up the shotgun I kept by the porch, and marched forward. My knees might have been old, but my grip was strong. "Mark!" I shouted, the barrel leveled at his chest. "You take one more step with those cattle, and I swear to heaven you'll regret it." The men froze. Dust hung heavy in the moonlight. For the first time since I'd met him, I saw something flicker in Mark's eyes, fear. But then he smirked. "You won't pull that trigger, old woman. You're bluffing." My finger hovered just above the trigger. My heart hammered so loud I thought it might burst. Maybe I wouldn't pull it. Maybe I couldn't. But he didn't need to know that. The scarred man stepped closer, his hand brushing the knife at his belt. "Let's take her down," he growled. Before he could move, a voice cracked through the night. "Leave her alone." It was Linda. She stood by the porch, barefoot in her nightgown, her face pale and her hair wild. Her hands trembled, but she was shouting at the top of her lungs. "I won't let you hurt my mama." Mark spun toward her, his face twisting in anger. "Go back inside, Linda. You don't understand what's happening here." But her voice didn't waver. "I do understand. You lied to me. You used me. You were never here for me. You were here for this." She gestured at the land, the cattle, the Tesla parked by the house. Tears streamed down her face. I was too blind to see it, but Mama was right. The men shifted uneasily. Mark's jaw clenched, and for a long moment nobody moved. That was the peak, the gun, the cattle, Linda finally standing on my side. And then, as quick as lightning, the moment snapped. Mark lunged. "Not at me. Linda." He grabbed her by the arm, yanking her forward toward the truck. "If you won't help me," he snarled, "then you'll stay quiet until this is over." Linda screamed, struggling against him, but he was stronger. "Let her go," I shouted, my hands shaking so bad the gun nearly slipped. "Mark, don't you dare." He didn't listen. He dragged her closer to the truck, the scarred man moving to help shove her inside. The cattle bawled louder, their chaos echoing the chaos in my chest. I took one step forward, aiming square at Mark's back. My whole body trembled, torn between fear and fury. And that's when the ranch flooded with light. Headlights, dozens of them. Trucks roared down the dirt road, tires spinning, engines growling. In seconds, the yard was alive with men shouting, flashlights swinging, boots pounding the ground. I lowered the gun in shock. Because leading them, his hat tilted low, his badge flashing in the light, was Sheriff Hawkins. And he wasn't alone. Right behind him was someone I never thought I'd see again. My eldest son, David. The roar of engines shook the ground, and beams of light cut through the dust like swords. The cattle scattered, some charging back into the pasture, others bunching together in confusion. Mark froze, his grip on Linda loosening just long enough for her to stumble free and run to my side. I wrapped my arm around her trembling shoulders, my shotgun still heavy in my hand. "Drop it, Mark," Sheriff Hawkins bellowed as he stepped out of his truck, one hand resting on his holster. His deputies fanned out, flashlights sweeping over the chaos. Mark's face twisted, wild and desperate. The scarred man and his partner raised their hands slowly, realizing they'd been caught. But Mark wasn't finished yet. He darted toward the Tesla, yanking the door open as if the car itself could save him. "Don't you move," the sheriff roared. But Mark moved anyway. Before he could slam the door shut, David was there. My David, my boy I hadn't seen in years, now grown, broad-shouldered and steady as a mountain. He grabbed Mark by the collar and yanked him clean out of the car, slamming him to the ground. The struggle lasted only seconds before the deputies swarmed, snapping cuffs onto Mark's wrists. He cursed and fought, his voice raw with rage. This isn't over. That land belongs to me. You'll all see. His words echoed into the night, but his power was gone. He was just another man in chains, hauled into the back of a sheriff's truck. I stood there, lantern light flickering across my face, as silence finally settled. That was the extreme peak. Justice crashing down on a man who thought he could take everything. And then the quiet came. The deputies drove away with Mark and his men, leaving the ranch bathed in moonlight again. The cattle had calmed, the dust had settled, and all that remained was family. What was left of it? Linda clung to me, sobbing softly. Mama, I'm so sorry. I should have listened. I should have believed you. I stroked her hair, my heart aching but also swelling with relief. Hush now, baby. You were looking for love. We all make mistakes when our hearts are hungry. What matters is you found your way back. David stepped closer, his face lined with the years we'd lost apart. He removed his hat, his eyes shining in the lantern glow. Mama, he said quietly, I came as soon as I heard about the inheritance. I thought maybe you'd need me. Looks like I was right. I reached for his hand, squeezing it tight. I always needed you, son. More than you know. That night, the three of us sat on the porch, the crickets chirping their steady hymn. The land stretched out before us, wide and endless, Clara's final gift shimmering under the stars. I told them about Clara, her kindness, her stubbornness, her love of the land. I told them about the years we wasted, letting pride and hurt divide us. And I told them the truth I had learned, the truth Clara had left behind in more than her will. Family, I said softly, isn't about who has the most money or the biggest car or even the land under their feet. It's about who stands by you when the storms come. It's about kindness, about lifting each other up, even when it's hard. That's what matters. That's what we almost lost. Linda sniffled, leaning against me. David nodded, his jaw firm. And for the first time in years I felt whole again. That was the quieter part. Love stitched back together after so much pain. But life has a way of reminding us that peace doesn't come without its shadows. Just as I began to close my eyes, rocking gently on that porch swing, headlights flared again down the dirt road. Not sheriff's trucks this time. Not strangers. A single sleek car. It pulled up slowly, gravel crunching beneath its tires. And when the door opened, my heart nearly stopped. Because stepping out was a woman I hadn't seen in decades. Elegant. Her hair silver but her eyes sharp as ever. Blair. And this time she wasn't smiling. This isn't over, Margaret, she said into the night. You think you've won. But Clara's land was never yours to keep.